Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Disney panics down billions on purchase of Star Wars. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from Breitbart, Disney still billions in the hole 12 years after Lucasfilm purchase. Disney bought Lucasfilm, the company that owns Star Wars. In 2012, they paid a little bit more than $4 billion for it, and they still haven't made their money back. They claim they made their money back. They claim they made a profit on it, but it's not true. Coming from Forbes, Disney's Star Wars box office profits fail to cover the cost of Lucasfilm. It's not that Disney hasn't made any money off of Star Wars. They've made some money, but they've also lost money. And they haven't been able to continue to put out Star Wars films. They severely damaged the Star Wars brand when they decided they needed to turn it into something it never was. It's just about the worst possible outcome for anyone who was a fan of Star Wars or an investor in Disney, with Disney taking over the Star Wars and Lucasfilm related brands. Disney didn't just damage and lose money on Star Wars. Disney lost money on Indiana Jones. From Breitbart, far left Disney lost $134 million on Indiana Jones 5. That's an estimate. It probably was significantly more than that. A lot of costs are not included when these numbers are accounted for. Analysts do the best job that they can. And on the same side, a lot of these movies can be sold far into the future and also spin off into other things if they ever focus on producing good movies and TV shows and merchandise again. Whether they will actually do that or not is completely unknown. Disney is not actually focused anymore on producing good entertainment. They're focused on pushing an agenda. As I do this story and I get into this story, I find it hard to completely account for what Disney considers a success or not. If it's completely on the numbers, it's not really a success. If it's on, hey, look at us, we can destroy Luke Skywalker. We can wipe clean Star Wars from American culture. We can make sure Luke Skywalker never inspires a young man again to want to take on impossible odds and go on adventures. If that's what their goal was, they're pretty successful with that. When I went looking for a thumbnail for Star Wars for this video, I can't do a video talking about the failure of Star Wars culturally or as a financial investment and put Luke Skywalker's face there. It's not his fault. He was a successful character in Star Wars. Rey was not a successful character in the Star Wars universe. Rey relates to everything that's wrong with the Star Wars universe, but Rey is Star Wars now. Coming from Breitbart, Disney still billions in the hole 12 years after Lucasfilm purchase. Last month, Disney told stockholders the company generated a 2.9 times return on the purchase of Lucasfilm. That would be almost 3 times the amount that they spent buying it. But according to Forbes, that's a big fat lie. The idea behind releasing that lie was to prop up Disney CEO Bob Iger, who was facing a stockholder rebellion. He eventually won it, thanks to lies like this one. From Forbes, buried in the fine print is the revelation that the purchase price of Lucasfilm isn't even included in the return on investment calculation. Instead, it is purely focused on the box office performance of Disney's Star Wars trilogy, its 2 spin-off movies, merchandise, DVD, and Blu-ray sales. As revealed, the methodology is questionable as Disney based the return on investment on the revenue generated by the movies, merchandise, DVDs, and Blu-rays, rather than the profit they made as it should have been done. Now, I will make this statement. They can calculate profit almost any way they want to. The claim that they made, they explained what their basis was for that claim. Hollywood accounting is notoriously berserk. From CNN, Hollywood's absolutely bizarre accounting tactics are under renewed scrutiny. This article talks about how movies like Men in Black that did something like $600 million on a $90 million budget many years ago, not a profitable movie, even though it had sequels, even though it had licensing. Is it deceptive? Yeah, it's deceptive to put it in a better light than it actually is. But if they want to show that this is how they're accounting for their return on investment, they can show that it's technically legal. However, using the revenue rather than the profit generated from the Lucasfilm projects artificially inflates the result, as it doesn't factor in the costs that Disney had to pay out. It also doesn't include really all of the overhead, all of the offices, all of the salaries. Do they account for some of the overhead? I haven't seen the details inside of the calculations. If they want to avoid paying profit participants, so for example, if they have a deal with actors or producers that pay them an additional amount of money if the film hits a certain amount of success, Hollywood studios will declare no profit or the lowest possible profit, even on a very successful film project. But when Disney has a flop like Indiana Jones 5 and they lose $134 million, what part of Lucasfilm's offices, executives, and other very expensive resources that were dedicated to producing films and or TV shows was allocated to that lost amount? We don't know, and we're never going to know. Disney plays these kinds of games all the time. And it's not just Disney with Hollywood, but Disney is doing it as much as anyone else, if not more. There's the accounting for profit on the film projects, and then there's accounting for the profit on their public company. I've looked at their financial statements and had questions about it and discussed it with a couple of other finance-related people. Their profits essentially are whatever they say their profits are. The way that they say, oh, we made this Star Wars movie, here's the profit we made on it versus the loss we made on it. Disney is very aggressive with their accounting principles. Back in 2012, Disney purchased everything attached to Lucasfilm, Star Wars, Willow, Indiana Jones, for a little bit more than $4 billion. 12 years later, you can look at the results. After 3 abysmal sequels as a film franchise, Star Wars is doornail dead. We were told Disney intended to take the most beloved brand in the movie industry and marvel it, meaning 2 Star Wars movies a year. That legendary Star Wars universe would be explored up, down, and sideways. Get ready for adventures galore, Star Wars fans. The result? Not a single Star Wars feature since the abysmal Return of Skywalker in 2019. Over and over, we've been told half a dozen Star Wars movies are on the way, only to see them canceled or forgotten. Even those terrible prequels couldn't kill Star Wars. But Bob Iger and Lucasfilm chief Kathleen Kennedy found a way. Feminize, politicize, scold, lecture, demean, and emasculate classic heroes. Take all the fun and joy out of it. Message over story. No sex, no glamour, and affirmative action. Thy name is Rose Tico. If Disney had deliberately set out to destroy the Star Wars brand and to destroy the Marvel brand, I don't know what they could have done any differently. It's as if they are erasing the brand and the characters from history. It's possible that's what they really actually wanted to do. Keep in mind, even though movies are a lot of money, losses like $1 billion here, $2 billion there, they're down $3 billion from what they spent, roughly speaking, on Star Wars. That's a lot of money. They've lost tens of billions of dollars on other things, like streaming services, like the acquisition of Fox. Their stock is down at least $100 billion from its high from just a couple of years ago. They can afford to lose money because they get a lot of cash in the door. It's almost like a Ponzi scheme. I'm not saying Disney is actually a Ponzi scheme, but it's almost like a Ponzi scheme. As long as revenue keeps coming in every month, and it does, from streaming services, from theme parks, from some movies, from their cable channels, it just keeps coming in every month. They are more than able to keep all of this going. Disney decided to further debase Star Wars with half a dozen or so super expensive Disney Plus streaming shows that garnered lower and lower ratings on Disney Plus, as Disney Plus lost billions of dollars and millions of subscribers. Those shows, just so you have an idea, all the Star Wars shows cost around $25 million an episode to make. The early Mandalorian episodes apparently were cheaper to make, but after Bob Iger left, all of the budgets went up. If they even had budgets at all, they just spent money like crazy. Disney's budgets on everything went wildly out of control when Kareem Daniels was essentially in charge of distribution for Disney. Bob Chapek, when he was CEO, reorganized Disney's businesses so that Disney's content, all their movies, all their TV shows, would be sold to their own distribution company that they own themselves. Kareem Daniels said in an interview, and I was shocked when I heard this, that he wasn't concerned about Marvel shows doing well or not doing well because they all became part of the Disney library and they owned all of them. So there was like not a serious consideration for watching their budgets and making sure they were really getting value for whatever it was they were actually making. He was right that anything they make, they will have the right to resell in the future, whether it's on a streaming service or to one of their own cable channels or to someone else's cable channel. But of course, you ultimately do have to care about what the content is. You can't just say, oh, well, it's part of the Marvel brand. It's always going to be good. Oh, it's part of Star Wars. It's always going to be worth something. That seemed to be what Kareem Daniels' actual attitude is. He has now since been thrown out of Disney and is not involved with the company anymore. No doubt he was following the instructions of CEO Bob Chapek at the time, and the board was well aware of what they were doing, but this was outrageous. This is something they never should have done. It is one thing to go and say, you know what, we don't want a Star Wars brand to appeal to boys. We don't want it to appeal to men. We don't even want to have nostalgia. We don't care if it's profitable or not. We want these brands gone. But at the very least, have some respect for budgets and produce things that have some limit to them in terms of cost. If your goal is to destroy the brands anyway, you don't have to lose billions of dollars when you do it. So I'm offended on a creative level, I'm offended as a fan, and I'm offended as a business guy. It makes no business sense to destroy these brands this way. You can still destroy the brands if you really want to, you just don't have to spend all this money doing it. They spent investor money to do this. It's not like it was the manager's money. The Disney Plus Willow streaming series cost a reported $100 million and turned a beloved children's fairy tale into The Boys in the Band. What's The Boys in the Band? From IMDb, The Boys in the Band. A birthday party in 1968 New York. A surprise guest and a drunken game leave 7 gay friends reckoning with unspoken feelings and buried truths. And what was the point of the movie The Boys in the Band? For the most part, The Boys in the Band is about pride and identity, not just sexual identity, though that's important. As Ryan Murphy has said, the film speaks to the changed word in terms of how homosexual behavior was treated merely decades ago. Also from Breitbart, queerness is core of Disney Plus's Willow series. That's what they're focused on. The backlash that followed killed any chance of a second season, and the show was eventually pulled entirely from the streaming service. They took it as a total loss. To take a show as a total loss is to say it has no real value in the future. Nobody wants to see this. So a company that does that can write all of it off on its taxes as an expense to say, look, we spent all this money. It turned out to be a total bomb. It has no future. And that's exactly what they did. And they didn't just do that with Willow. They did that with a bunch of other projects as well. And then on Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones is such a beloved character that even the terrible Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, for all of its flaws, Crystal Skull didn't have Indiana Jones emasculated by a sexless, unattractive harpy, which is exactly what last year's Dial of Destiny did, which resulted in at least a $134 million loss. The numbers that Forbes uses to estimate that Disney is still down $2.8 billion in box office profits from the $4 billion approximately that they spent to acquire Lucasfilm don't include other factors. They don't include all the merchandising. They don't include the value of the library. Even though the Star Wars movies were terrible, they didn't write them off as completely worthless. And they do continue to license Star Wars on their own streaming service. You'll see Star Wars on cable channels from time to time. They could easily go ahead and relicense The Mandalorian. They could relicense other Star Wars films that they own, other TV shows they own in their library. They're not worthless. If Disney was to go and try to sell Star Wars today, they could sell the Star Wars brand and all of the library for $4 billion. They could sell it potentially for as much as $8 billion to someone that wanted to do something with it. It's not like it's completely worthless. But also because money is not really a priority for Disney, pushing an agenda is a priority for Disney. They have not generated the kind of profit they should be generating from the Star Wars brand. They've also damaged the Star Wars brand. There's no way to know what Star Wars could have been if they actually only produced good, on-brand, well-crafted stories that weren't trying to push some kind of agenda. Who knows what Indiana Jones could be worth? Who knows what even Willow could be worth if they didn't turn it into, what did they call it? A focus on queerness? It's at the core of Disney Plus's Willow series. When you spend $4 billion to buy something that's successful, you're supposed to keep it successful. You're not supposed to say, oh, I can use this to do something else with it completely. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.